What's really good, everybody? This is Nathan Allebach, and welcome to the podcast where we get into people's stories and go down a bunch of rabbit holes about what's really good in the world. For today's episode, I spoke with my coworker and good friend, Jeff Cassel. Jeff is a guitarist, artist, and one of the most all-around creative people I know, honestly. We've known each other for maybe 15 years or so, initially from the local music scene. Jeff played guitar in a hardcore/metal band called At Long Last, and I was just some angsty, emo suburban kid, so the scene was my getaway from home or outlet for rebellion or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, eventually Jeff started interning at my family's advertising agency as a graphic designer, and about 10 years later he started working with me there. So we've been really good friends for a few years now, just sitting across from each other every day. We banter about politics, popular culture, social issues, spirituality, and really just every other topic you aren't supposed to talk about at work. Yes! In this episode, we got into what it was like growing up together, and specifically what it was like for Jeff being raised by two sets of parents, and sort of how that dualism shaped the way he still thinks today. He's super fascinated by Carl Jung's work on archetypes, so we got a bit into that, then took a turn into talking about Jordan Peterson. Jeff, along with myself, was someone who really jumped headfirst on the Peterson phenomenon right off the bat and has since come to critically deconstruct and reevaluate his views surrounding the ideologies just espoused by all the people in the quote-unquote intellectual dark web as a whole. So it's so hard to say that seriously. This talk was a blast, and Jeff is just such a self-aware, fluid thinker, so we both ended up just rambling and talking in circles a bunch, which is honestly my favorite thing to do. So I hope you all enjoy it as well. Now let's get into what's really good. All right. We're live.
All right, we're live. Take two. Are we allowed to say that this is take two?
We can say whatever we want. We just started recording this podcast, and about 5 minutes into it, I realized there was a humidifier running and just creating this white noise under everything. And I kept thinking, what is that? Did we break the studio?
Yeah, I saw your face change, and I was like, wait, am I already being like uninteresting and talking too much?
I was like, Jeff, explain a little bit about yourself, and my eyes just glazed over.
It's like instantly.
Where's that sound coming
I get
from?
that you already know everything, but am I that
out
boring? Everyone's in for a rough ride.
Yeah, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be. Yeah. All right. So, Jeff, again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Good to be here.
Let's again start over, even though for everybody listening, this is the first time. With who you are, what you do, how you came to be where we're at right now.
All right. Well, I am your coworker here at the office, where I do graphic design and illustration and a little bit of all things creative, I guess.
Idea generation.
Yeah, idea generation, writing, editing, filming, animation.
Pretty much
I can
just
keep going.
Living the dream.
Yeah, really though. I just show up, make stuff, and then go home and then make stuff.
Yeah.
And live life and be cool.
The life of a mad artist.
Yeah, I guess.
So what got you into design and the whole creative field?
I don't know. I kind of always wanted to do it. Like, I was always drawing when I was little. I was always into, like, music and stuff. I think, actually, I want to say this was like a DARE thing back in the day.
Like DARE?
Yeah, the DARE.
Oh, my God.
Back in, like, elementary school, put on those, like, DARE assemblies for the parents.
Yeah, they worked so well.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, they like went around, they passed the mic to every kid, and you had to say what you wanted to do instead of drugs.
Right.
And I don't know how old I was, probably like 9 or 10. And I was like, I'm going to draw cartoons. And they were probably like, this kid's totally doing drugs.
That is the pathway to drugs.
Like, well, he's
put you
hopeless.
on a list.
Yeah, next. Oh, this kid wants to be a firefighter? That's a little better.
Yeah, like as soon as you turn 18, they have a list of all the kids who said art. And they're like, all right, we're going to this kid's house.
Yeah, I think if I would have said more than one sentence, they just would have cut my mic.
Right.
That's not what we want to hear. But yeah, I was always into it. I always knew that's what I wanted to do. I was always told that you could never make any money doing it. So through like, I guess high school, I was trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of led me to like advertising and commercial art. That's like, I don't know, you got to get that bag.
You do. Isn't that the worst? It's so weird thinking about you saying that, because that's, I mean, I quote unquote wanted to be a musician at that age, like in high school. And my family and everybody I knew said the same thing, where you can't make money doing music. And it's funny because now it's not my main gig, obviously, but now I do make money playing music gigs on the weekend. Which
is awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like after high school, I played a little bit during college, but I went to college out of state, so I would only I kind of became a guest musician in the band that I was like a founding member of.
Yeah.
But yeah, right after, towards the end of college, I was like, okay, that's probably it for music, because I mean, I invested all this time into the art, so like obviously I'm going to focus on that.
Right. Yeah. I just spent 4 years trying to get this degree, and now I got to use it.
Yeah. And we never made any money playing. I mean, we played metal. Yeah. And like nobody's paying money to see a local metal band.
Right.
Like at least for the kind of music you can play, like your options are like limitless, because you could do like covers. You're a singer-songwriter, so you've got
I never thought
the doors
about it like
are open.
I'm playing this guy's retirement party next Saturday. I've never met the guy. I got referred by someone else to play this thing. It's like a 3-hour, like you know, all the hits. He wants hits from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, which it's one of those weird things where growing up, whenever I would see that, like there's always that guy who does the cover songs at the bars.
Yeah.
And you always, like,
some of those guys and gals are really good, though.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they'll cover it and you're just like, whoa, can I get a recording of that?
Well, that's what I was getting at, how growing up as a musician, songwriter, you always looked at those people, and it usually is like the stereotype is this grungy 50, 60-year-old man who's just like looking like they're trying to live the rock and roll dream still, and it's sad because they look sad. And as a young kid, you look at that and it seems, like I never want to be that way. Yeah. But now as an adult, and as someone who has a job and is pursuing other goals and feels good about where they're at, when I look at that, it doesn't seem sad at all anymore. It seems natural, and it seems if you're into music at that age, and you know, whether you're retired or maybe you're working a job you don't really want to be working, especially in those cases, it's an outlet. Even if you are playing just like cover songs, it's just fun.
Yeah, it's fun for you, and it's probably fun for usually everybody listening to you too. Yeah, if you're into it, you're just not like a judgmental little doucher anymore.
Right. I totally am. I'm just a grown-up judgmental douche. I judge different things. I look at that and I'm like, that's an inch closer to my mortality, my inevitable death. It becomes more real, so I can't judge it as harshly.
Yeah, well, it's still good.
Yeah.
You came around on that, so.
Just that one realization. Anyway,
I'm sure there was more.
I sidetracked you completely. So anyway, yeah, you were into music, and you were told that you couldn't do music in high school, and you went to school.
Well, I wasn't told. I just felt it. Like I could tell.
It was told by society, basically. Everybody. It was an unsaid rule.
All the hints, all the shows that we played were like, something has to change if I'm going to be able to do this. Like even physically, like it's fun being super exhausted at the end of a show. Mm-hmm. Like you really went at it.
Yeah.
But like to have to do that every night, while making no money, while spending all your savings, and traveling in a van
Eating
and all
out,
that
out
stuff.
of gas stations.
Yeah,
all
just
that.
like destroying your body. Like I went to school, art school, so I could be sitting in air conditioning and preserve my body because I'm a baby.
Right.
I can't be riding around in all kinds of vans and
You're not some like
sleeping on the floor.
230-pound, 6-foot dude with these thick 1-inch gauges, just looking with a half gallon of iced tea, looking to wreck people at age 35.
Yeah, and like
in a mosh pit.
And I'm not trying to like knock that at all, because like for some people that's the dream. That's like heaven on earth.
Yeah,
and like
we know a lot of them.
Yeah, and I totally get that is a thing for people, but knowing myself, I wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
Cool,
so
man.
There's that.
Well, it's funny because that's how we met initially, isn't it? Was it through music?
Yeah, kind of the music scene.
Right, because we knew each other.
Like you were into metal at the time, so...
Yeah, my friends played in metal bands.
Yeah.
I filled in for a show or two. I didn't really play, though.
You played bass, didn't you?
Yeah, terribly. Just...
Who knows?
Who did know how to play an instrument back then, I guess, looking back. But...
And also, you didn't go to those shows to hear bass virtuosos.
Exactly.
You came there to see double bass, maybe a little bit of shredding.
Yeah, the drummer.
And then you just wanted some chest-grabbing vocals that you could bounce off of your friends to.
That's all you needed.
But I do miss the scene.
Yeah.
Because it was so much fun. It was fun playing, and it's still fun going to those shows.
Yeah.
Like I've been to one recently, and I just kind of like lost myself in the crowd again, and that was like, I don't know if you get that exact feeling anywhere else, or I haven't experienced it there. Like you just become like, I don't know, part of this wave. Like your body is just like literally the water with everybody else's, and you have to move with it. Otherwise, like you're going to be exhausted. Like it's easier to just jump along with, and you're actually exerting less energy somehow.
It's like a mob.
You just got to like accept it and let it take over you, and you're going to have the best time. You know, I mean, to think about all like the sweaty, like who knows what kinds of stuff is coming off of everybody else's bodies and sticking to yours. It's just
if you're that guy in those shows who is just, you know, they get elbowed or something and they're just crying or like I can't believe, like they're all or they get pissed and they're like, I can't believe someone would push me. I can't believe someone would elbow me at like a rock concert or a metal concert where everybody is tightly confined, and that's just what like you said, the room is sort of moving back and forth, and it's fun to jump in, and it's definitely an energy that doesn't really exist anywhere else. I always think when there's certain times in my life after I'd gotten out of that sort of phase where people have asked me, because there's pictures of me online from like moshing and stuff from back then. Like I've joked about it for years.
I remember seeing the footage of you at the Purple Door.
Stop.
It was your first
so
mosh.
Bad.
Dude, I saw your first mosh.
That wasn't my first mosh.
It was presented to me as your first mosh.
It might as well have been, because it was so bad. I don't even know what the hell I was doing. But it was hilarious how, at that time, there wasn't really logic to it. So like after the fact, if you never experienced it and you're like, why would someone ever do that?
Yeah.
I can't explain it to you. It was just like an energy type of thing.
Yeah.
Like it was a combination of angst and groupthink. You know, you're in a mob of people, and it's just energy. Like you're going with the energy of the band.
It's like you have this energy that you need to expel, and this is where you can do it, and everybody's like, yeah, dude,
it's safe.
Do it.
It's safe. You're not actively trying to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Like even if you do hurt someone in a quote unquote mosh pit or a thrashing pit.
Yeah, everybody helps the person.
Everybody is exactly. People help them, and even if they don't help them, there's still this like, I don't know, communal understanding of this is what it is. We all have the awareness that this is what you're getting into when you stand close to a pit at a concert. So it's a weird dynamic where even if you do get hurt, it's like I had my nose broken at the video that you are talking about that year. It was 2006 or 2007. My nose got smashed by this older guy. All I remember is he was bald. Because all I saw was the back of his head, and he literally swung his head full force backwards at me.
Damn.
Just smashed my neck. I blacked out. I was on the ground, just blood gushing, and I was really far from my home. And called my parents, I remember, and they were like, "Oh, you're fine. Just whatever, ice it. Come home." I come home, and
let me snap it back for you real quick.
And I remember I had asthma and bad allergies all growing up, so I already had like breathing problems in my sinuses.
Sucks.
And then this just deviated the septum so bad that from then till it was 2014, I think I got sinus surgery finally. And the doctor who did the surgery looked at my nose and just said, "What have you been doing? Like, you literally haven't been able to breathe. Like, I haven't been able to breathe through my nose for like 10 years. It was pretty. It was the first. After I recovered from that, I remember thinking, I can't believe. Like, if my kid ever wants to go to a mosh pit, I have to. If they ever hurt themselves or get punched, I shouldn't even say that. If they get punched in the face and break their nose or anything, we are fixing them because I didn't even know what I was missing.
Yeah.
At the time.
Wow. So wait, you can breathe out of your nose now, though, right?
Hear that?
Good.
It still makes a noise.
Take my word for it. That's a nose noise.
It's not perfect, but I can get air through my nose. There's still like cartilage all screwed up, but it is what it is. Anyway, we don't gotta stay.
No, it's okay.
Stay on that topic, but dude, so
Moshing's cool.
It is the best, and we do. That is how we came to know each other.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
I just hit the mic.
You're fine.
I'm back.
It's your we're live, but
take 3.
So start the recording over. So I mean, dude, like you said, we've worked together for almost 3 years now.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah,
it's been a long time.
Yeah, but we knew each other longer than that because I had interned here about 10 years ago, my senior year of high school. That's actually, I think, where I first met you face to face.
Yes, we knew who each other were.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
And between then and me going to college and coming back, and then eventually getting hired here, we were still in contact and doing some, like a little bit of hanging out, little bit of, I was doing posters for you for the shows you promoted.
Yeah. The coolest posters ever.
Yeah.
BTW.
They were pretty good. They were pretty
really
good. Were. They made you think you were getting into something maybe a little bit more serious than the building next door.
Right. It put me a league above the MS Paint.
I'm just over here
flyers.
tooting my own horn real quick. Like, yeah, they were sick.
They were sweet. I'll put those old flyers in the show notes for people if they want to check them out after the podcast.
I remember there was a couple that I based off of like those old like Swiss designs that you see in like art school, and like those I felt really good about. You don't get to do those often in the real world.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that.
It's true, yeah. There's really not that world of music and art and whatever you want to call it, community planning, whether it's at a venue in the city or a local community type planning situation is when you use flyers to promote like artsy looking flyers. So you get a lot of those cool, unique designs.
Yeah. And like the purpose of a flyer is to be eye catching and almost be like not literally be a puzzle because you want to have the information out there. You want to get it. Yeah. But like flyers get pretty wild. Yeah. Because it's just a whole bunch of creative, open people saying like, make this as cool as possible. Yeah. And then nobody's like really micromanaging anything. From my experience. Yeah, it's super rad. Not like the corporate world. Right, which we work in every day, where literally everything is micromanaged. That your Steak-um persona rallies against. That's true, man. You got every waking hour. You got to fight the bureaucracy, call them all cowards. Yep. That's the motto of Steak-um. Then eat lunch, and then get at it again, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Just sometimes I'll get once in a while when I'm feeling squirrely, get those 2 a.m. tweets from just like you up on Twitter, just like rallying against the system. Yo, Jack, you up? That's my fave. But dude, so we've been working together forever, and we sit across from each other, so we talk every day and banter. So there's really nothing about all kinds of stuff that you probably shouldn't talk about in a work environment. That's so true. We get so deep into politics just and in a room issues. Full of everybody, and we never know if anybody else is listening because nobody's acknowledging it. They don't care. I don't think they care. Guaranteed they don't care, but also like I don't know. I feel like sometimes if they do overhear, they're like, what the hell is going on
I know.
over there?
We're just using we're using terminology like the intellectual dark web. And then you're like, what? It sounds like some
Stuff
terrible,
like that, because
terrible video game.
Yeah. Yeah. Aren't we supposed to talk about, like, I don't know, the Twitters and...
right. Just social media and marketing.
Yeah.
But we
texting.
we get into all, like, yeah, so we sit across from each other and we're interested in a lot of the same things. So inevitably we touch on a lot of
politics. Religion.
Yeah.
I mean, those are pretty much the
well,
untouchables in the work environment.
And they encompass all the things that we care about and enjoy talking about, but are also difficult talking about. So
right.
I think...
Yeah, they're fun to think about, but hard to talk about. And for whatever reason, our brains just love thinking about things that have no answers.
Yeah, isn't it weird, too? Like, you and I are both pretty avid podcast listeners, and it's been interesting in the course of only recording a few of these so far, and how I can't tell you how many thousands of podcasts I've listened to over the years, and I'm so critical of people on podcasts and how they portray their views publicly. Not just podcasts, but just publicly in general, whether that's on social media, at talks, etc. And I'm so critical of how... Cause I always want nuance. It's like, oh, I wish so-and-so had more nuance. But then you get in front of a mic or you get on your social media and you start to realize how difficult it really is to be a nuanced person in this world with political, religious views.
Thinking about this recently, like being nuanced versus taking a hard line on something. Like, you can't really be nuanced and be clear about anything that you're saying.
No.
Like, you have to almost take a harder stance than you do in your personal life to say, like, here's this idea that I'm trying to get across. It's definitely not this over here.
Yeah.
Which is I guess the easier part to remember, where other people are like, yeah, screw that over there. Yeah, give me more of this. And then it's just like, I think that's part of maybe what... No, I don't want to make excuses for this thing that we're going to talk about later.
No, it's fine. But I was going to say, I think that's why, at least partially why, people on the strong left and the strong right hate moderates and they hate centrists, because there's sort of a... So there's two ways of looking at this, where there's centrists and there's moderates who don't take a stance on anything. And everything is up in the air, and everything is, oh, well, the other side this, or the other side that. And it's this sort of weird word game where it sounds nuanced, but really it's just lacking any critical thinking.
Yeah.
And it refuses to, like, but it's like that, I think it's a Churchill quote. I might be totally wrong, but it's something like, it's something of the notion where the only reason you want to get good at the only reason to chew on something is to eventually, like, bite down. Basically, like, which is the idea, like, you want to be able to chew on something for a long time, but eventually you do that so you can really bite down and know what you're
sounds like the reason to have an open mind is to close it on something.
Exactly, that's the same.
Who was that, by the way? Was that...
I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
I always assume it's like C.S. Lewis or something.
No, I think I think that's the quote I'm thinking of. I think maybe somebody meshed it like a different way. I don't know, but that's the idea. And I think so. There's that way of centrist moderate thinking, and then there's the other way, which is what I would consider wisdom thinking, which is actual people, and you see this mostly in people above the age of 50 who have at least gone through enough life experience to know, like, maybe they've experienced decades of different political systems in place and social movements, so they have a strong I guess experience, like, wealth of experience under their belt to know that they can say certain things with not just, I guess, nuance, but brevity and understanding, and they can say it in a way that is not this surface level kind of just up in the air BS. You know, they say it in a way where it's like, no, this is actual, like, we need to be more critical and nuanced in these ways, and not just hard line, you know. But that only to find someone who actually does that for real and isn't just some charlatan who's like the other side, like a Dave Rubin, just like, well, the other side, like, well, the left.
How's it feel to be non-regressive today?
like everything is just like, well, I'm a liberal, but the left.
Yeah.
And like that's like such a common thread in today's, because of the polarization. You have all these like wannabe intellectuals who, and not just public figures, but just people in your life, like people we know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who look to this stuff and they try to sound smart by basically saying, but the other side with everything, without actually having a stance.
I feel like it's a very, very rare person that is able to be nuanced in like an original opinion and be brief at the same time. They seem like they're like categorically opposed.
Yeah.
Like the definitions are opposite.
Yeah.
Like I realized that more and more as I like tried to explain something for myself without using anybody else's words. I'm just like, I'm either not really saying anything about anything, or I'm going off on a tangent that's so deep by the time I can get to my point. I mean, not that anybody cared to begin with, but whoever was left is already like definitely gone by now.
Right.
And, well, yeah, I guess that's like the two options.
Yeah, that is it. And it is really, really just hard to...
Yeah.
I think that's why it's hard to have conversations. Because it's like the two...
Well, and to be a public figure, and not only, like, if you do that once and then everybody's like, oh, this person has something to say.
Yeah.
To have to do that again and again and again about any new thing that comes up or any just other topic that comes up, it seems like impossible.
Especially the older you get, too. And the older you get, you just get more set in your ways, and the neurological grooves in your mind develop, and it just...
I wonder what that, like, median age is, where, like, you're still fluid enough, but you've also, like, you've actually experienced something, so you, like, know what you're saying. Yeah. You're not just like, oh, this idea is nice, and this idea is nice, but they're all abstract.
35 to 45.
All right.
Maybe.
Yeah, so what are we doing here?
So, dude, okay, let's just jump in at this point to what... The thing, I guess the thing underneath the thing that you are fascinated by and have been fascinated by for the past couple of years, and you can kind of like, which is archetypes. Yeah. So let's give, like, I don't know how you kind of want to jump into this, but do you have like a starting point?
Should we get into this? I mean, we want to talk a little bit about just like our kind of, just a little bit about like our maybe religious upbringings.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to tie that in. So like,
I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of in that realm in a way.
Well, yeah, because an interest in this type of thinking, like archetypal thinking, which is just basically symbology and looking for structures that are underlying culture that you don't see on the surface. Yeah, basically.
And I guess it doesn't have to be religious. It's just like any kind of story, really.
Just generally, it has been predominantly religious.
I think that was the what inspired like the development of this field of like thought. But it happens to expand out into like really every creative enterprise. Yeah, I guess. So
like, what was it like growing up for you then? So, I mean, getting you, like, jumping onto this topic of interest, because, again, because you and I talk about this stuff every day, we have similar scopes of interest here, and not completely similar, but similarities between us in how we were raised. Like, in religious, obviously, like, if you're raised in America in the past however many decades, obviously you're probably raised Protestant or Catholic or some form of Western Christianity.
At least in our area.
Yeah, especially.
It's like there's almost nothing else.
Yeah. So you want to get into a little bit?
Yeah, that's where I came from. My parents had split up when I was like maybe 2 or something. I don't even know. Like, I just don't remember a time. It was before I was making memories. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So it was always kind of like I grew up in 2 places. So I went to 2 churches. One a lot more than the other, but I was kind of introduced to. I mean, obviously there's a ton of overlap, but I was introduced to 2 modes of thinking that weren't exact. So it kind of like maybe introduced me to, not that I knew this term back then, but a very small scale type of like moral relativism, maybe.
Right. Yeah. You weren't trapped in binary thinking, which whereas someone like
I
was raised,
I kind of was
in
each house
in a different sense,
but
yeah.
in myself, I had to do this like internal figuring out on my own, because like obviously one parent is going to say, well, if you're having some difficulties, do this that I do, and the other is going to say this.
Because the typical nuclear family in America, it's just like the one family goes to the same church, same community, and everything is a very
family
no, you're fine. There's a clear in-group, out-group. That's all I was going to say. So it's very binary, like this is bad, this is good, this is right, this is wrong.
And also it's so deep, because like not only does your family go to this church, but your family's family has probably gone to that church in a lot of cases for decades,
or at least like they've lived in the same area and know all the same people. I have the same ties, which is it's very
so. But, like my dad's family, his family, actually his dad's family and his mom's family both went to the same church, and they had been going there since like, I actually found this out recently, since like the 1800s.
Wow.
Or like maybe like, I'm sure like late 1800s.
That's still crazy, but though. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, that's how it was told to me, and I was like, well, I didn't know that building was even that old.
Right.
Or maybe it wasn't even that building, but at least that.
Yeah, because communities move building to building.
Yeah. But like the person that it was named after, like he started these churches, just like a couple of them, 2 or 3, in like maybe early 1800s.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was over at my dad's side. I actually haven't been to that one too much. I was mostly going to church with my mom, and that was a local Lutheran church, and they just kind of like picked that one because my parents, or my mom's side of the family, is first generation immigrants. I don't know exactly what the terminology is. My mom was born in Portugal, but came to America when she was, before she could talk, so she actually learned English first, but like they're Catholic over there. I don't remember ever going to a Catholic church, maybe like once or twice. So yeah, even before I was born, there was some kind of like meshing of doctrines.
Right. There were whispers in the wind.
Yeah.
Things were changing.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe that's where this interest kind of came from, was just kind of like being between these like solid structures and finding a way, your own way through it.
Yeah, just navigating that process growing up.
Yeah,
it's got to be crazy.
And wanting to do it, not like, oh, here's 2 things that are saying a little bit different things. That must mean that both of them have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, because the natural state for a lot of kids, especially teenagers who go through divorce and have I guess more the word, I don't know if the word destabilizing is right, because it's not always a destabilizing condition, but just more, I guess, just different directions, more tension. I should, like you're saying, you were being pulled by 2 different families. So, I mean, like if a teenager has more of that in their life, obviously I think you're already prone to rebel as a teenager.
Yeah, so that's a rough time to have that happen.
Yeah, so it's hard, I think, this is just generally speaking, who's to say for each person, because obviously you navigated it really well.
Yeah,
so
but I also think it was beneficial for me in a way to have had that happen so early.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything else. So that's like, I developed in my mind around that.
Yeah.
Like that was a constant. It was like a weird constant.
Yeah, it wasn't
that
like
everything's
you had a structure,
kind of fluid.
and then like 10 years old, the structure was gone, and then the rug got pulled out from under you, which is what happens to a lot of kids. And then that is more like neurologically chaotic, because you don't have, like, you're going through this like extremely crucial developmental years, and everything is just shifting around you, whereas you grew up in that shift already.
The way I look at it, it's almost like a positive. Like I got to see 2 structures, and then just like, I don't know if I'm a more open person because of that, or because I'm an open person, I kind of made that into a positive.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure. That might never be answered. Yeah, probably. Yeah,
just
it's
yes.
got to be both.
Yeah.
That's usually what I do.
Yeah.
If there's two seemingly opposing answers, it's definitely both. Like nature versus nurture. Obviously, it's both.
Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah. So when did you initially, I guess, start to spark this interest? Like in your, was it in high school or?
I think consciously it was sometime in high school, like maybe, I don't know, like sophomore, junior year. I actually said like out loud, I think I texted one of my friends and I was like, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm just going to read every book that I can, like every religious book from different places, just to see what they say. Like see how much overlap there is, and also see like what maybe my culture hasn't thought of or something like that. So yeah, that led me to some interesting places. Like I was reading that in high school and like all throughout college and really up until now. Like it's just kind of like stuck. Like for whatever reason, I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's just my disposition.
Right. Yeah. How much? It's so odd thinking how much of this is determined, like predetermined already. Like we have no free will.
Yeah.
This is just.
Well, I think we have free will, but it's on a predetermined platform. Like obviously, you're free to make whatever choices you're going to make, but you might only think to make certain choices.
Which basically makes it not free will, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on how you want to define free. It depends on how you define it. Free.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah,
I think about that all
like
the time.
obviously I can't decide to just like fly out of this chair and float up onto the second floor.
There's limitations, but there's also not just physiological limitations, but there's innate, I guess, psychological and just the mental limitations, where if you're raised a certain way with a certain cognitive functioning and certain genetics in your family line, obviously there's going to be certain limits to how you think and what you think and the direction you're going to go. You know, it's always interesting to see. It's funny. I'm already starting to see this. I don't know if you tell me if you've noticed this at all. How many years out of high school are you at this point?
10.
So you're 10. So I think I'm 8 years out of high school. Yeah. So I'm already seeing a lot of kids who in high school, when they were kind of going through their rebellious whatever phase, they were hyper progressive, because in school it's cool, I guess, to be hip and progressive and all that.
Well, I think also like generally you're more open. Exactly.
Kids in general, like there's always there's that corny quote where it's like, show me a young liberal or show me a young conservative, you see someone without a heart, show me an old liberal and you see an idiot.
That was actually Churchill.
That's Churchill?
Yeah.
Churchill has all the quotes. It's fine. But yeah, it's just the idea, like when you're younger, you are just naturally more dispositioned to be open. So you're more compassionate. Yeah.
And not because you get older and you're not compassionate anymore. Your compassion, I think, manifests in like more immediate ways.
Right,
like
it's family, finances.
Yep.
So like I've noticed a lot of those kids that, like, 'cause I can see it on social media now, where a lot of them who were hyper progressive are now ultra conservative, and not even 10 years later. And it's interesting because not in all the cases, because obviously I don't know every kid I went to high school with's family, but for some of them I know who they were, whether it was through like playing sports with them growing up or like just different community events. And in almost all the cases that I've seen, again, this is totally anecdotal, so who's like, you could easily combat this point, I guess, but I'm just interested in it. I'm interested if you've seen it at all, because in a lot of those cases, their parents were conservative. So it's interesting how you kind of go through these phases, but it's almost like ultimately you've already been predetermined to how you think. You know, like I come from, it's weird because I don't know how mixed you are with it, but I come from two kind of polar opposite family. Like my dad's side of the family is hyper progressive liberal, and just kind of not that they're not seriously religious at all. Like there's some members of the family who have gone to church in the past and all that, but they were never like fundamentalist. Whereas my mom's side of the family is hyper fundamentalist and hyper religious. So it's weird.
And conservative?
And conservative. Yeah,
That's interesting. Because knowing your parents, I would have guessed that the opposite was true.
You think
if I had to guess.
Because they're both pretty conservative now, but my dad is still he's artistic, so he still has an openness to him. Yep. But he's structurally become more conservative.
Well,
as he's gotten older.
He seems, obviously he's artistic and he seems really open, but he's also like one of the most disciplined people I've ever seen.
Yeah, which is huge in conservatism. So it's interesting. So I don't know. Like I've already seen patterns in myself at age 26. So I'm thinking in so many ways I'm progressive, and I'm constantly trying to challenge myself and stay open to a lot of possibility, and obviously minority groups, and understand, like having empathy, like you were saying, natural compassion. Mm-hmm. But I'm already starting to see a lot of those tendencies creep into just the way my brain is structured. It's interesting. Have you noticed that at all, like in yourself or your friends?
I've in myself, I think I have a lot of friends that are still very progressive. Mm-hmm. Not to say I don't have friends that are conservative as well. I noticed myself becoming, in ways, definitely more conservative. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe just be a side effect of like living on my own and trying to figure out financials and thinking about like I'm married now, thinking about how I have to make decisions for a family when we have one. I wouldn't call myself a conservative at this point.
Yeah.
Both of my parents are remarried, and all four of my parents are all conservative. But yeah, like I don't know if you would guess that, because my mom.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. My dad, in his like demeanor, seems like a very open, and like he's just like one of those people who loves people, and it's just like you do what you do and I'll do what I do. Right. But I think his politics are conservative, which kind of surprised me when I realized that, because that was pretty late. And my mom also seems like very, very open and compassionate. Not seems, she is.
Yeah, she is.
But I think that she would probably identify herself as a conservative too.
It's so interesting. It's like the underlying structures. The older you get, there's all these really weird. You start to think about just structure as a whole differently.
My mom's parents, though, I would guess they were probably liberal, but they were also immigrants. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, you have to be pretty open to come to another country,
right?
And just
build a whole new changing life there. Everything. It's a complete 180.
Yeah, and changing churches. Not only changing churches, but changing denominations.
Yeah.
But people are complicated.
Yeah, aren't we? Well, a lot of this ties in. I mean, okay, just to kind of jump in at the baseline then to the talk about archetypes, because
it's tough to get into it. I'm not trying to not get into it.
No, you're fine. But but again, it underlies all this, because it's interesting how coming out of those structures, like those religious structures, whatever you want to call them, that we kind of were raised in, both you and I, which we don't have to get into here, have gone through different deconstruction periods in young adulthood to obviously we're not in those systems, those older religious systems anymore. We're in new ideologies and new mindsets. So it's interesting to get into this stuff, which is something that you're really fascinated by and that you read a lot about, because archetypes are sort of the language that underlies a lot of this. It's a lot. Yeah. A lot of people like a Joseph
It's actually
Campbell.
Even before language.
Exactly.
Which is wild.
Let's just jump into it. Because I mean, a lot of people, like they look at a Carl Jung or a Joseph Campbell, and they have there's these sort of communicators of archetypes that use symbology to, and a lot of people who are, I guess, not progressive necessarily, but sort of post-religion in some way, look to figures like that to structure all this. I feel like a lot of
progressive people, too, to do a name drop, Alan Watts is also very influenced by like Carl Jung's thinking. Yeah. Like Jung was doing his thing in like the early 1900s, like World War I, World War II. I think he died in the 60s. Okay. But I know when I was learning like psychology in school, one thing they made note about him was that he was really big into combining Eastern and Western religions. But nobody ever talked about archetypes, and that's why he seemed like he was doing that.
Yeah.
I mean,
cool. Let's jump in on the ground level.
Let's do it.
Let's just hit it. Let's just let's fend to the rules and hit the ground running.
I'm gonna. All right, real quick. I was at my little brother's graduation Monday, and they were testing out the piano, playing through the loudspeaker, and it's like all student musicians and like choirs and student band and everything. So they're testing out the keyboard, and I was like, I know this song. They were playing All Star.
Get out!
Yeah.
The memes have spread into the youth. It's just
the youth live in the meme.
I
now.
know, but that's like an old.
That's
meme.
why our jobs are so fun right now.
I know, it's all kids. It's just weird. Like when I think about a meme like that, though, I think it's like an older. In my mind, it's like we grew up with Shrek, which is where All Star kind of popularized. Yeah. So it's weird to think that kid like your little brother is his generation.
He's been watching Shrek since he.
That's amazing.
Before he could talk.
Yeah.
Like, because when my brother's 10 years younger than I am.
DNA.
So when I was watching Shrek, he was a baby watching Shrek.
Oh, my God.
So this is how, like, these things happen.
He didn't even know it was affecting him.
Yeah.
He didn't even know
None of us did.
Like, you're, like, swaddling this child in your arms like, somebody. He's just, like, taking it all in. That baby's going to grow up to be the president.
Yeah. And also a funny other like kind of coincidence at this same graduation ceremony. So there's the valedictorian, and then there's the what's the other one? It's like the vice vice valedictorian. It's like salutarian or something. I have no idea what it is. But in his speech, he said this old adage, which doesn't seem to have an origin, but it's. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch habits, they become a character. Watch character, it becomes your destiny. And I was like, archetypes.
That sounds like something super intense that maybe like a Morgan Freeman type character would say in a trailer for a new video game.
Yeah. Yep. Fable 3.
Just
Fable 5.
Elder Scrolls, some. That's fantastic. Right. No, I love it, man. Cool.
So let's get into this.
Yeah.
Kind of I'll start with this little like anecdote from my past. We're talking about church. When I was around like 11, and you posting a story right now, bro?
No, dude. My phone kept vibrating.
We're going live.
I'm gonna throw it. Just gonna throw it on the ground.
All right,
Can you hear that, people? Throw yours too.
I'm gonna throw mine too.
It's like in Pineapple
mine's
Express.
Face up. I'm going to try to not look over there.
Yeah, I've seen in Pineapple Express where they throw the cell phones in the wood. He's like, why did you throw it?
What do you mean the battery's dead?
All right, sorry for sidetracking.
Okay, yeah. We will get into this eventually.
Let's hit it.
We're only like 40 minutes in.
45, it's fine.
Oh. Are you counting the first take? Anyway, let's go back to when I was about 11 years old. I'm sitting in Sunday school class.
Okay.
We're going to talk softly because we're in Sunday school class.
Shh, gotta whisper.
Yeah. No, we can talk. It was a pretty open class. I had fun there. Like I didn't have a bad experience or anything. I didn't leave because it was. I left because I was curious.
Lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. From stories I've heard, which really surprised me.
Yeah.
Is.
A lot of twisted youth pastors out there and Sunday school teachers.
I know everybody listening, or a lot of people listening, are probably going to assume we're talking about the worst. We're not necessarily talking about the worst, just like people that don't know how to be people.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, Sunday school class. I'm 11. This is like shortly after 9/11 happened. So people were talking about some pretty serious stuff, and people had a lot of questions. And we were kind of talking about like the topic of Islam came up, and God, and I guess kids were asking about quote unquote their God, and I don't know how.
Yeah, there was so much confusion at that time. We were so young.
Yeah, like the God I know, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of spoke up, and I was like, well, I don't know if it's their God. Like if if we believe in one God, like it's got to be, there's one God.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, they're like, but they call him Allah. And I was like, well, they have a different name for him. Because they speak a different language.
It means the same thing.
So I was like, it's got to be the same guy. And then I gave this analogy, which in hindsight kind of reveals a lot about my perception of like religion and spirituality. I was like, you see, it's like Sasquatch and the Yeti. And like I look up, I'm like, my pastor's like mortified. He's like, what is this kid about to say? So I was like, North America has Sasquatch, Bigfoot, right? And then in Asia, they have the Yeti. And they, like, you look at them, they're the same thing. Like, they just have different names. Like, they just look different because one has to hide in the woods and the other has to hide in the snow.
I'm crying. You were what, in 6th grade?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that happened when I was in 6th grade.
That is the wisdom of a child. That is fantastic.
So, like, obviously I wasn't saying that believing in God or a God is like believing in Bigfoot, which I think is what my pastor thought. Yeah, they're like, what is about to happen here?
What is this kid's parents teaching him?
Yeah. But at the end, like, everyone kind of got what I was saying, and like the way the pastor jumped in. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, yeah, that's a good point.
He's like, basically what Jib's saying is that Sasquatch is going to kill the Yeti, and just, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. It totally wasn't like that at all. And we don't live in the South.
That would have been so... But I knew pastors like that.
Oh, yeah,
I know that. It's just a fun... Sorry if you're out there listening to this, pastors that I know. I love you somewhat. You just have, it just is what it is.
So, I definitely couldn't articulate this back then, but looking back on it, I was using those symbols as a way to illustrate belief and how, like, the collective mind of a people will express a belief using their own experiences as a template.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of like what archetypes are. It's not like the template. It's what you're applying to your own template. Like, it's an unconscious thing. You can never actually describe like what an archetype is.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's this tendency to come up with these ideas to explain certain things.
Yeah, like we talked about this before, where there's I love the comedian / podcaster Pete Holmes, and he had this great quote that I loved, where he talks in this language a lot. He talks about God, but mostly in the mythological sense of the archetypal sense of the word. Like, it's more of this thing that we don't understand, whatever, like the beyond, the unconscious, whatever, the unspoken. Yeah,
it's like a stand-in for like the unknown.
Exactly.
That encapsulates everything.
And his quote that I love, that I don't even remember when he said it. I don't think he's not like a inspirational figure, so it's not like one of those, you can't just Google the quote. There's like a Google image with him smiling, and it's like a black and white text with this quote.
Dude, you got to find where it's from, then turn it into an image, and then tweet it, and then somebody else will be able to do what you want to do. And look it up.
Exactly what needs to happen.
Do that tonight.
I'll do it.
But anyway, go ahead.
But it's just the quote. He said the only vehicles giving tours of God Island are myth and metaphor, which is just the idea that you can't describe God. You can't describe the unknown. You can only use myths / stories / religion, belief, whatever. You can only use these ways of these systems that we've developed over time, and then you can only use poetry and language to describe. You're separated from the thing itself. It's not like a science equation where you can write it down and you get an answer. You can only try your best to describe it in these methods. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and I remember the last time you told me about that, I was like, you said myth and metaphor is like the vehicle that takes you to God Island, and that would kind of make archetypes like, if it's a train, the archetypes would be like the train tracks,
right? In a way. Right.
So yeah, if you're looking at it from a strictly like secular perspective, that would be one answer for why there is so much like commonality in cultures that, while they were developing those ideas, had no contact with each other, but they still
all over
came
the
up
world.
with a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
a good jumping off point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good baseline
So that's
for
what
people.
So a lot of people, when they think, when they hear the term archetype, they're thinking like images and like symbols and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like a lot of people would only hear it in context of writing stories. Like you brought up Joseph Campbell, like the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And like there's like certain characters that always show up, and those are actually archetypal images, which sounds like it's like a trivial distinction, but it's actually pretty important to specify the difference, because the images are like the symbols. The archetypes are like these natural laws of the mind that are like unconscious patterns that evolved with like the rest of the world, like as our minds were developing along with the world. And like that's kind of like why they're universal. But archetypal images aren't necessarily universal. They're kind of universal like within a culture, but not between cultures.
But they look different everywhere. Like whereas like you could in the West, obviously there's the Jesus story. So Jesus as a character is like
the Messiah figure.
He's a hero in the hero's journey to many. Yeah, or a Messiah figure, and either one of them, like cross cultures, there's many figures that look like Jesus or seem like Jesus. They share similarities and traits, but they aren't. That isn't the archetype. The archetype is just the hero, right?
Like so, like going back to the Sasquatch and Yeti thing, there is a wild man ape hominid thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, in a way, like the archetype. Actually, even that is an archetypal image. So it's really hard to like say what actually an archetype is, but it's this pattern. Like I kind of think about it as like the physics of the mind. Like if physics are like the building block of reality, then archetypes are kind of like the building blocks of our conscious processes.
Right.
So
because wasn't it Aristotle or Socrates who had the example of
forms?
Forms, right? Because like a table, like when you look at a table,
Plato
right,
through Socrates. He used Socrates to explain.
He was his teacher. So like the table, like when you look at a table, you can you can knock on it, you can observe it with your mind, and you can imagine it. You don't even need it. You don't even need it in front of you. You can imagine what a table looks like in your head. But your conception of a table is once removed from what a table actually is. You're imagining what a table should be with the tools your mind has created of what you know about tables. But what a table is at its deepest level, this is so philosophical and boring for a lot of people, but what a table actually is once removed from that.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
That's what it is.
And Carl Jung got one of his main influences for coming up with the concept of archetypes were Plato's forms. He's like, it's this thing, but he is applying it to like the domain of religion and narrative, basically narrative and experience, because his goal was to apply that in his psychological practice. So, what else did I want to say about that?
You tell me, Jeff. I don't know. I'm enjoying it.
Should
you've done all the reading. I love talking to you about this because you've read all the books.
The books are so long.
They're so long. You come in with these books and you're like, oh, I'm reading this book. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Jeff, I'm not going to touch that 1,000-page
I'm still in the process
book.
of trying to like distill these books because, first of all, like they're all translated from German.
Yep.
So all the sentences are literal paragraphs.
Yeah.
Like there's so many commas per sentence. And you're like, okay, I just read a sentence. I'm exhausted. I need to unpack this for about 40 minutes over a tall, cool Budweiser.
Cool Budweiser. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I had my notes, but I'm kind of like jumping around. So I'm like, I think I kind of like gave everybody that we can talk about some images that you'll probably see everywhere.
Yeah, let's talk about some like really basic ones for people to pick up on. Because I think for a lot of people, I mean, there's people who are interested in whatever philosophy, psychology, etc., who have a sort of grasp on what all this is, but then there's a lot of people who just either aren't interested or they don't ever think to think in these terms. So when you actually reveal to them where you can find them, all of a sudden, if you're down with it, you can start to see them everywhere, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, so there's like, the main ones are mother, father, and child, which expand out into like literally every other definition that you could possibly come.
Right?
Yeah, and that's why like the mother's first, and they say that for a bunch of reasons. Like one, it seems like the oldest cultures worshipped feminine gods. Like they assumed that the creator was feminine, because I mean, just look in your own life, like you come from your mother,
right?
Like
fertility is everything. It's the survival of the tribe. It's
and then like later cultures came around with the father, who you can kind of look at it like there's a bunch of earth mother belief systems, and then there's like sky father belief systems.
Mother Earth.
Yep,
and
Mother Earth.
And old white dude God of
exactly.
the clouds.
Yeah, archetypes in action.
Right.
And I would guess that like going back to the nuclear family, like your connection to your mother is so close, like you literally shared a body, just like all the living things on Earth shared this body with the Earth.
With the soil,
So that's how you can tell like you're in like an archetype situation, is that everything, like as above, so below, everything that's happening on the small scale is simultaneously happening on the large scale.
Right.
And that's why it's like an archetypal thing. It's like
and
you're tapped into this root pattern that's
across cultures,
fractaling out everywhere into
like
you
were saying, how like all these different cultures developed over time, on similar trajectories, not with the same beliefs and the same understandings, but these archetypes were underneath all of their beliefs.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you could probably root that in like biology and all that. Like that would be towards the mother end of it.
Yeah.
So and then like you got the father sky beliefs, and which kind of also symbolically makes sense in your own family, because like you never shared a body with your father. He's kind of like not a satellite figure, but in the very early stages of like when you're an infant, like you are still attached to your mom. Your dad swoops in once in a while to help out.
He's up there. Then, he's like, you're reaching up. You're looking up at dad, right?
Yeah.
Whereas
so
if
it's
you're
like,
with mom, you're like up with mom, like you're literally like breastfeeding. You're up here with mom. Yeah.
So, the father, like there's literal air and space between you and your father.
Yeah.
So then the child is the child kind of shades into, and a lot of these shade into each other, kind of shades into the hero. That's all the individual, and you separate from everything else, like you with your conscious thoughts and action and free or not so free will.
Debatable.
Yeah. Then there's the hero, and there's the devil or the adversary, and it's kind of like the flip of the hero. Like if the hero is everything that strives for the good, obviously the devil's the mirror image of that. Yeah. And could be anything that the hero comes up against, like any obstacle kind of thing. And I'm going to oversimplify all of these in the interest of time.
Right. And in the interest of people who are trying to digest it, it's like, because you can just keep going deeper and deeper into each one of these.
One of the coolest ones is the Trickster, which is actually separate from the devil, which obviously in like Christian culture, they're kind of
they're entwined.
The same.
Yeah.
Like the devil uses his trickster aspects to do evil, where the trickster itself isn't evil. It's more like mischievous.
Yes.
Like things can be this way, but they can also be this way. Stay on your toes.
Yeah.
Like there's the wise old man, your Gandalfs, and there's also the wise old woman. Like there's a masculine and feminine of
each
all
of these. Yeah.
Except not the trickster, because he is both. He's
trickster is just the trickster.
Yeah,
it's almost like
He isn't one thing or the other. That's why he's tricky.
Yeah,
like trickster figures in mythology and stories are always like shapeshifters,
right,
metaphorically or physically.
Right. You know who's a great trickster that I'm thinking now in my head? In Zelda 64 Ocarina of Time, the windmill person who does the Song of Storms. Do you know who I'm talking? Do you play Zelda?
I didn't play that Zelda.
Oh,
no. Yeah,
Jeff.
Keep saying it for the people who are like, right. Yes, the trickster.
He plays this what do you call like not an accordion? It's like he does this. What's I'm doing a motion with my hand right now.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to like wake up a Jack in the Box.
Right, like a Jack in the Box. Yeah. But it's like a almost like a, I don't know, it's like dun, 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 and it's a song, and it's he like through the power of this song or whatever, it changes like the weather and all this stuff, and it causes chaos. But it's like, yeah, it's
that's
just
wild.
There's a couple. I think there's a couple interesting tricksters in that video game, which is I think that video game is timeless, and people still play it to this day, which is insane. But sorry to sidetrack you. My mind went to that, and I was like,
no, that's not a sidetrack at all.
So cool.
This topic, there's no way to get outside of it,
right? Because it's everywhere.
Yep, it's everything. And then there's like the idea of, I should say, no. Well, there's God or a God, or just a supreme being. Mm-hmm. Like, seems like all people believe in supreme being, or at least the idea of a supreme being. Probably
something beyond.
Yeah. It probably comes from being a self-aware kind of creature. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, there's got to be a thing that's...
Yeah. You ascribe meaning to everything because you ascribe meaning to yourself. Like you've ascribed self-worth to who you are, so there must be worth. Like there must be something ascribing that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some figures. There's also like archetypal events like birth, separation from your parents, which is like kind of the start of the hero journey.
Right.
Is separation from your parents also isn't like your physical parents. It's like your community and your culture.
Yeah. It's like when songwriters use the word home. Like home can mean so many things. It's just the language we use to describe that.
Yeah, and this also shades into initiation and becoming like your own. I was about to say man, but your own individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always easy to think of all this in masculine terms because of how it was written from way back then. Yeah. Everything is like a he. Even like post, like in like gospel terminology, or like Jesus' time, where I think it was Jesus who said like there's no more man, woman, or whatever. Like, but it was still they spoke.
That's the union of opposites, which is I'll get into in a couple steps.
They still spoke when they like at that point in history. Interesting little tidbit for people theologically, where when they referred to the people like followers as in the masculine or whatever at that time, it was supposed to supposedly it was supposed to be progressive because women at the time were seen as lesser still culturally. It's like just as a general rule, like in that era as a whole. So when they were referred to as brothers, etc., like he and she, it was more like we are all this thing.
Right.
Like the masculine was supposed to encapsulate the he and the she. Which obviously it's way different now, but apparently that's how it was then, where it was seen as like, no, we're all brothers, etc.
And if you go like into this symbolism, the idea of a singular thing, like an individual, is described as masculine. So like, I mean, obviously girls have elements of masculinity in them, just like
men have femininity.
Yeah. So they use the masculine to kind of signal that it's totally isolated, because the feminine is by extension kind of shades into the mother relationship. Not literal mother, but as in like the feminine kind of describes...
Because they're together.
It kind of describes a relationship between two...
Because of the mother to the child.
Yeah.
Whereas the masculine describes
or like
more.
the lovers. Even though there could be two masculine lovers, or masculine and feminine, or two feminine, the act of being the lover is symbolically feminine
because of the
it's
birth.
The inner relationship. And by extension because of the birth.
Sorry, I'm just thinking biology.
Yeah, yeah.
So my brain goes back to that
it all
automatically.
kind of like, it can connect into whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, see that you're on that track, so you're going wherever it's going to go.
Yeah. Because it is interesting. It's hard to, like, again, it's just weird. I'm trying to think from the outside looking in for, like, a listener, because it is odd terminology. Like in today's modern, like, progressive Western culture, like, it's a weird, the way a lot of this terminology is, like, fleshed out. It's odd, I think, in more of an egalitarian society, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of come back, because it sort of falls in, like, the evolutionary psychology realm a little bit, where there's just like a lot of biological, psychological components that are at odds fundamentally with like a lot of progressive ideology. So just the language itself becomes problematic for some people.
Yeah, and it's real easy to confuse masculine and feminine with male and female.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because like why in your everyday life, why would you think about it any other way?
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I know a lot of masculine women. That doesn't mean they're not feminine too.
Right.
And I would actually like probably describe myself as a more slightly feminine male. Like just the stuff that I'm interested in. Like I'm interested.
You're definitely more
in
thoughtful
art
and caring
and stuff.
exactly artistic.
I'm not into as much like, I don't know, your typical masculine things,
You're not,
like
like,
construction and like all that. Not that I'm not interested in that too, and don't like appreciate
but
that.
But you don't have those
do
strong biological urges where there's a lot of guys who are looking for fights and looking for dominance. And
it's not my first direction to go.
Yeah.
And like I'm a smaller dude. I'm pretty small. I have really small hands. My fingers are thin for playing guitar and drawing some stuff. But yeah, so
continue.
Masculine and feminine.
Yeah, it is what it is. I was just trying to...
Next stage is marriage. There you go.
Beautiful.
And then union of opposites, which is like incorporating your shadow. It's accepting contradictory experiences and knowledge, and kind of like seeing like dualism is not a thing that's binary, but it's like a sliding scale between two poles, which I know like Pete Holmes and a lot of guys that you... Well, who is that guy? Richard Rohr?
Richard Rohr.
Yeah.
Oh, I love him. For anybody listening, he's a Franciscan friar who, yes, he's religious, but in a much more elder sense and a much less
well, that's also a union of opposites. Yeah. So he's both in it and out of it.
Yeah, he's someone he's very into contemplative theology, where it's very much holding ideas and faith and just not like agnosticism and Gnosticism in the same hands, where it's all just open, and we have to, like, you have to plant your feet somewhere, which is why he still goes by the labels. Like he's very open about acknowledging the biases and the labels, but not letting them limit his perspective and limit his, like, how he lives in the world. You know what I mean? Like, he's not living in the box, but the box is still there.
Right. Yeah. Just because like you are outside of the box and not restricted to the box doesn't mean that you don't appreciate the box for what it's for.
Yeah, because the wisest people acknowledge you can't ever get rid of the box. The box is always going to be there. Like no matter how far away from the beliefs you grew up believing you get. Like if you're someone who grew up religious and you became an atheist, no matter how far you run from that structure and you think that you've made it past everything, you never get away from it. Like the structure follows you.
Can't escape the archetype,
you can't escape the archetypes. They're everywhere. So it's just you fall into a new box. It's just how it works. So it's interesting how that's like I love him as a third way thinking figure in all this, where he does deal within this tension, like you're saying. Yeah.
I think I was going to say something about the union of opposites, but that's probably enough. Like you get the idea. That was kind of Jung's like final goal in all of this. It was a process he called individuation, which is basically the union of opposites, of all opposites, like you know, like your ego and your persona and your shadow, and like owning up all of that into your whole self and incorporate everything where it's supposed to be, and knowing who you are, in relation to like your internal processes, like your biology, your genes, your predispositions, and your external culture. Like I brought this book in, the Undiscovered Self. It's pretty much all about that. It's the process of individuation, so that when external forces are trying to guide you to do something that's not for the good of yourself or the external, you have that center, which is holistic, that you can draw from to use to just make the right actions, kind of thing. So the union of opposites is the goal.
That's my favorite.
Before death, which is the final archetypal event.
Maybe I'm gonna die soon then, because this is what I'm so fascinated by right now, and I'm trying so hard to live within.
I think that's a pretty exciting life, though, to work on that union of opposites for your entire life. Yeah,
because it never ends. Like, you never arrive there.
Yeah. And it's not like you only do that, but it's a good thing in the background. It's like, let's do this. It's like third way is every way.
Right. Yeah, like the new album that I'm working on now, which isn't really an album you and I've talked about. I don't know how I'm going to release it yet, but it's like a full-length amount of songs, and the title that I had been working with was called Tension. And the title track, Tension, lyrically, it's all about this, where the lyric goes something like, there's different verses, but they go in the sense of, I don't know a thing about anything, but I sure like to act like I know everything.
Yeah.
And how funny that is. And it's just this weird thing where I'm constantly having to acknowledge my predispositions in everything, biologically, environmentally, socially, and how I come across to others, where I have to be aware when I come across as a know-it-all, or when I, in my own mind, have thought that I know it all, versus the sort of more nuanced part of me that's constantly curious and open to learning, and feels like a complete idiot. Like there's, you know what I mean? It's like I'm constantly juggling these two aspects of who I am, where there's one part of me who's never feeling like I get anything. I have a terrible memory. I'm really bad at retaining information. I don't understand a lot of really basic concepts the way I wish I did, so I'm really insecure and hard on myself. But then on the other side, how I come off personally, like I'm very strongly opinionated, and I have strong will, so it's easy to come across like I know everything.
Well, you need to do that in like to do an action. Like you have to be confident in what you're doing,
but you just have to be aware. It's living in that tension.
You can't expand that certainty out too far, because that's when problems happen.
Yes.
But I think it's natural to feel the opposite when you're thinking about things that are bigger than yourself, because like nobody can even understand themselves. So like how can you understand yourself and anything around you?
Yes. Some people just get caught up in the wave of they get lost in the sauce. Or some people, they get so caught up in their own ego, and
they might not even know that there's anything outside of it.
Exactly.
Of the ego. Like they don't understand what.
Or maybe they do, and they've turned that into like an ego journey. Like they've made the hero's journey into an ego journey, where they take even the concepts we're talking about right here archetypally at the base level. There's a lot of people, I think, who are really... I met a lot of these people in college, like in philosophy classes, where there's always the kid, depending on how big the class is, who is so smart, but they are such a know-it-all, and they're so fascinated by all of this material, but they use this material as an apparatus for some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, where they think it's like furthering them along this imaginary line that they're going to eventually reach a destination and be like the smartest person on the planet, whereas that's just an illusion. And I think that's why, whether it's someone on the far left or the far right or someone in the middle, it doesn't really matter where you are, but there's people all over the spectrum who have that mindset of just, I have figured it out, and I have the tools. I understand archetypes. I understand psychology. I understand philosophy. I have the tools that you don't get it. You simple people don't understand. And that just drives everybody nuts. And we all hate that, because it's so divisive and lacks it's like they're so deep in the thing, they can't even realize they're in the thing anymore.
Right.
Which is lost in the sauce.
Dude, I don't love being lost in the sauce, but you got to accept being lost in the sauce.
Yeah, at some point you have to, because you can't hate yourself.
Yeah.
At some point you have to be able to say, okay, I'm okay with this, but you have to constantly be wrestling with it. You can never just give in and say, I'm okay with it and I don't care.
Yeah.
Like there's people who just like don't give a shit and they just like revel in this whatever ego selfhood, and it becomes just destructive and obnoxious and, you know.
And they don't have a good time.
Yeah. Or the opposite, or they just revel in their insecurities and hating themselves, and both extremes lead you to this sort of, it's all about the self, whereas like the goal is to detach from the self, which is a super privileged position as a whole. Because I mean, obviously, like if you're at a baseline, if you're
even
baseline,
be thinking about it to begin with,
because like, which is sort of a prerequisite to all of this. Because I mean, if your baseline needs aren't met on a day-to-day basis, obviously you don't have the time or the resources to get, or the interest really, to get into any of this. But if you
but I think a base knowledge of like these types of patterns will, I don't know, for me it's kind of like, it's encouraging in a way. Mm-hmm. It's because like there's nothing that can happen to me that isn't already like mapped out in some way, if I can figure out how to recognize it, right, and like come at it at a certain mindset to maybe increase my chances of like finding my way out of it, or at least like keeping my head while I'm working through it. Yeah. Like obviously that's a super privileged thing to say.
It is.
But
it's super helpful. Yeah. And you don't have to be, it is a tool that can, it's not like it's exclusive to people with privilege. It's just more prone, if you had those baseline needs met in a way where you could spend this time working through it. It's a lot to work through mentally, and it doesn't mean you have to be, I have to have a certain level IQ to work through. It's literally it's a time. It's a time game. Yeah, It just takes time to get through all this stuff.
Yeah. And I'm by no means an expert in this. I'm just like really interested in it. Right. So I'm not working through this stuff as fast as I'd like to. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I find that whether I want to or not, I somehow find some time for this just because that's where my interests go.
Well, we all have time. I think that's always important to acknowledge. It's annoying when you have those friends, and we all do it. Like I should say it's annoying not when you have friends, but when we all do the thing where we say, "Oh, I'm too busy to hang out with somebody," or "I'm too busy to do this." It's not we're all too busy, but it's because we make ourselves too busy. Yep. We fill our time with what we need to fill it with, and for some people they need solidarity. So like maybe their Wednesday and their Thursday night of a certain week is open, but to them it's not open because they know they need that time to decompress and to relax and to recharge, whereas some people need to have something going on every day and night of the week, and you make yourself available to the extent that you want to be available. Like I have friends who've worked, including me, like in the past several months where I was working 70-hour weeks some weeks, but I was still doing other things. I was still recording videos at the record store. I was still writing music. I was still playing shows. Like it's not like, you're so privileged you can just have time for all this stuff. In some cases, there's people who they spend 70 or 80 hours a week working and still make time for what they're interested in, which is a goal, whether that's a new business or ideas or furthering their personal career. It's definitely, time is a weird game that we all play.
It's a super weird game. I'm still trying to figure out how to work it.
I know, you can never master it, ever.
Nope.
But dudes, that was all fantastic. Let's pivot a little bit.
We're doing it.
Let's smash that pivot button and get into a little bit. You got into like what I guess initially interested you in all these archetypes, but what I am currently interested in hearing from you, because this is what we talk about fairly frequently just with current events and political, social settings, because we are very tied into internet culture and...
Yeah, for better or for worse.
For better and for worse. And so you sort of got reignited with a lot of this archetypal stuff a couple years ago with this resurgence of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
You had sent me like usual, a bunch of Rogan podcasts.
There's so many people will tell you that I do this. It's so bad.
Yeah. No, it's good.
I'm so critical of him, but I still sometimes he has amazing
can't help
guests
but
on.
love him though.
Yeah, it's like a love-hate.
Yep, he's a trickster.
Yeah, he's a trickster. He's a lot of archetypes, that's for sure.
Well, just like everybody,
interesting.
Nobody is one. Actually, yeah. You also, if you're going to get into this, you can't identify with one. This is going to sound like mumbo jumbo, but if you like obviously people are pattern-seeking animals. Right. So you'll see them if you're aware of them. If you identify too much with one to the exclusion of others, there's actually a thing that people call archetypal possession, which is where you, like, say the hero, like everybody would want to identify with the hero.
Right.
You can identify with the hero so much that you will constantly, it'll just consume your thoughts and change the way you think about things. Like everything will be through that lens, and you'll probably like push yourself to death.
Yeah, you'll ruin your life.
You could.
Yeah.
And also you can get like super narcissistic and like push, like not only ruin your own life but other lives around you.
Yeah.
And it's any, like you can get possessed by the mother archetype, like the Oedipal mother. Like the Freudian thing.
The devouring mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say something about that. It's been a long day, so my thoughts are leaving me.
Dude, I was just saying I wish I drank energy drinks or something, because my brain is pudding after today. So much going on.
But yeah, whatever.
So we're
going to talk about
Joe Rogan. You're saying he's all these archetypes.
Yeah, everybody is everything.
Right. So that's how. So okay. So just backtracking a minute in the past, I sent you the podcast when Jordan Peterson first went on Joe Rogan, and I was fascinated by his appearance. Specifically, at the time, he was touching on social issues that have been hot in the media, the online media that we follow pretty closely, which was this whole, at this point, ad nauseum has been talked about with this Canadian University of Toronto. He's a professor, taught there. Everybody knows that, I think, at this point. And he was rallying against this Bill C-16, which was basically a proposed bill that was enforcing professors to use students' preferred gender.
I think it was actually everybody.
Everybody, right, nationally, yeah. To use these preferred gender pronouns. And Jordan Peterson, as someone who is very, I guess, interested, I don't know if you'd call him an expert, but he's always been interested over time in this archetypal, a lot of postmodernist thinking, Marxist thinking. So he was very versed in the language. So this caught him in a weird place because he was the sort of, you can describe it better. You were really close to this. I mean, he got caught in a situation making statements that went viral on YouTube where
he it seemed like he was like, oh, the way that this happened and the fact that everybody was okay with this idea happening, that it's okay for the government to make you say something. He thought it was a problem and a symptom of trouble down the line that everybody was okay with that idea.
Right.
Like it wasn't on anybody else's radar.
Like it would lead to authoritarianism of some type eventually. But
like the Brave New World type of authoritarianism, not the 1984 type.
Right.
Authoritarianism.
Yeah.
So like, obviously it was a touchy issue because of what specifically it was about.
Yeah.
And people said he was like a transphobe and all this because he just wouldn't have like the basic human decency to call them that.
Yeah, it was politicized instantly, like left versus right type of thing.
And I think, like, who am I to say how well somebody should explain themselves? But in hindsight, I think there's some things he could have done better.
Oh yeah,
that would have avoided this whole shitstorm that,
like a snowball effect.
Yeah. You can edit out shitstorm if I don't know if we're supposed to.
You can say whatever you want, dude. Oh my gosh, no. Edit that out.
Edit it out, man.
I think that's a good 1 second before. Hold that thought just for 1 sec. I was going to say it is a good, I think, little nugget to throw in before we talk about any of this stuff, because you and I, we do talk on a daily basis about these different political, social issues and people, and how you and I are both two nobodies living in a suburban town who are really interested in all this stuff. And I've watched hundreds, if not thousands of hours of these people. So really, we're just like online critics. Like we're interested in it.
We're giving our hot takes.
Yeah, this is literally hot takes. Like we aren't, like it's always interesting to me. I get equally annoyed at myself as I do at trolls online who do this type of thing, because it's always weird to attribute motive and attribute like basically saying that you would know how to say something better or do something better, which we do all the time, which is it's human nature. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I do it every day. Yeah. Every time I've listened to Joe Rogan's podcast since 2011, and there's not a podcast that goes by where I'm not rolling my eyes. And I don't listen to all of them, not even close anymore, but he's affected my way of thinking so much over the years that there's a tendency to fall into this toxic pattern of just criticizing them as if you're better than them, which is not what we are doing.
Right.
We are literally we are criticizing for the sake of social, whatever you want to call it, like improvement of...
Yeah, I'm just saying things probably could have went better if this would have happened. Yeah. Which... So nobody could have known.
That's just like a prerequisite. Yeah. So we can say whatever the hell we want. But people have opinions, and people are going to make harsh statements that are binary and isolate one group or another. That's inevitable. But I just wanted to say, it is something that's we've talked about a lot. We're criticizing people who do this, which we have no idea
who are
what
actually
it's
a
like.
lot better at all this
right.
stuff.
We have no clue what it's like to speak in front of people or to teach or to do a podcast,
especially under that kind of pressure.
Yeah. So, and that's not excusing anything.
Yeah.
Again, like, I hate having to play these stupid word games, but again, just to give like a pre-setting, which shouldn't be necessary, but you never know in today's climate with who's going to get affected by what. So, continue on that note.
I think he should have kept the issue maybe a little bit more abstract, which maybe it wouldn't have took off at all. If it wasn't,
if it was, I doubt it would have.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were saying earlier about, you have to be unnuanced to a degree.
Yeah, to get any.
But you risk the wrong people latching on to the wrong elements of what you're saying, even when you don't mean it. Because I don't believe that he's a transphobe. I think
he said he got like 50 letters or 30 letters or something like that from trans students saying they supported what he meant and they knew he wasn't whatever.
It was more like he brings up these as an example. Like he always cites the book Ordinary Men and the book The Gulag Archipelago. He was thinking from that perspective of the individual going along with what the state is kind of telling him to go along with, even if right now nothing is bad. If you keep giving yourself in ways that your gut reaction you don't feel right about, even if you can't articulate why, if you keep doing that process, when it's too late, you might find yourself doing something that you wish you hadn't, and you're like, well, why did
it's the slippery slope sort of analogy.
Yeah. So it's not to say... So the idea of being comfortable with the government telling you that you have to say a certain type of word is worse than them saying, we're going to punish you if you say this word, type of thing.
Which is where it got pretty dicey in there, because it was the wording of it. It was a combination of the wording, but also the rhetoric around the wording. Yeah. It was more the intention of what it was.
So it's, obviously you should be a decent human being and refer to a person how they ask you to refer, like what's the harm?
Yeah, right.
But when there's potential legal enforcement behind that, then what other things can be legally enforced in the future?
Yeah,
that should be just between two people, and obviously this is me speaking from my ultra privileged. Like, obviously, there are groups that need to be protected, and the government is there to help protect those groups.
Yeah, so gay marriage was just legalized a couple years ago. Yeah. Like, people forget that. Like, it's like,
yeah, especially when you live on the internet and everything happens so fast. You're like, wow, that was forever. Decades ago.
No, it was just like 3 years ago. Yeah. And, I think that's an important point, too, because a lot of the way this subject was so fiery, it was as if the subject of just trans in general, like that is sort of the natural progression, like on the list after, like, you know, the gay marriage bill was passed and all that, and how now people were looking at that as like the next thing. Like, we have to protect trans rights. Like this is still, trans kids are still getting bullied. You know, there's trans suicide rates are super high. So that's sort of like one of the next items on the list of the progressive.
And it's such a simple ask to just
just
acknowledge
basic.
Me as I am.
Yeah, like a basic human right thing. But because of how already polarizing gay marriage was, like, people forget, I think people think because of popular rhetoric, like, whereas, okay, it's legalized and it's accepted in popular society, like most mainstream corporations and like Hollywood and all that, it's pretty normalized at this point. But still, it's somewhere around 40 or 50% of the country isn't pro-gay marriage. So it's this really weird territory where even though societally legislatively, we've pushed past this sort of older way of thinking, it's still lurking in the minds of almost half the country.
Yeah.
So when you push this new, now, social justice issue in front of people of transgenderism, transsexualism, I don't know if there's an actual... Is transsexualism a term? I don't know. My bad. I mean, I'm uneducated on the terminology, but that's when you push these newer terms in front of people, especially people who aren't familiar with them at all, who don't spend a lot of time in these corners of the internet or these, you know, inner city parades and protests where this stuff is like, boots have been on the ground for a long time with this stuff, but to a lot of the people in the country, it's still very foreign. So just the topic itself was so hot when it got brought up, you know, like it was like a perfect storm of so many things coming together.
Yeah, and I understand the issue that he had, and it was an important discussion to start, to say, like maybe we should, I would say, let this one go, but if he wants to sound this alarm for this is potentially the first step in a process that we could get, the type of a process that we could get too comfortable with. We just need to be aware of that.
Right.
And say, like, there is going to be a point where on the surface, like, the ends wouldn't justify the means. Yeah. And this isn't saying that this particular thing is that at all. Yeah. But I think that the point was worth bringing up.
Yeah. But the difficulty was how that point, because it was so fiery, how it got hijacked by right-wing media to take it as this is an anti-LGBTQ plus agenda point, where obviously not across the board, but mostly in popular media, where it became a lot of generalizing tribal identities, where it became all about the left. Like the left as a word, like a singular group of people, which really anyone who understands the political spectrum should know, that the left encompasses it's the most scattered and divided group of a tribe ever. Whereas the right is way more uniform. Like, you have libertarians and conservatives and far right wingers and fascists, and there's and alt right. There are groups, but they agree on policy. Yeah, and they agree.
It's the borders thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. They agree. It's archetypal. They have a lot of the same ideological framework. Whereas on the left, it's a lot more just divided amongst different, like, prioritizing different ideas and different issues, and there's not a lot of agreement on what comes first, and it's just way more difficult to generalize an entire, but that's what it became. That's what I'm saying. This thing became the outlets that picked up Jordan Peterson early on, like the Dave Rubins, who is just a right-wing shill at this point, which we all I think are aware of. But if there's people out there who are listening to this who like Dave Rubin, I mean, I'm not.
The first time I saw him, I admit, I was like, oh, this guy's pretty refreshing. He's like your average Joe who's just like, hey, things are getting kind of crazy.
Yeah, he wasn't pretentious. He wasn't trying to be like pushing. It didn't seem at first that he was trying to push a narrative, but then it became to the point where it's like he became the incompetent idiot, where it's like, okay, he's trying to frame himself like he's this fair, I'm just here to discuss ideas. Like, I'm just here to give a platform. But then when he stopped pushing back against far right wingers, when he had people on like Michael Cernovich and Lawrence Southern and just all these different right wing ideologues, basically, and he had them on and didn't push back on any. He never pushes back on right wing people at all. So it became this odd situation where he enables this ideology to be perpetuated in ways it shouldn't be.
And it wasn't balanced at all the way that the initial promise of, let's say, like, even the intellectual dark web is. Like, the promise of that is to be like this type of third way.
Right. That's how it's framed.
But it has to be balanced, and it doesn't seem balanced. It seems like
it's all libertarians or right-wingers. Yeah.
And, well...
Except Brett Weinstein. But even it's like he still just publicly focuses on SJWs and bashing the left, even though he'll say he voted for Bernie and he has leftist principles, which I'm not judging if he does or doesn't. I like listening to him.
It's just the topics that he brings up all the time.
It seems like the left.
So that's what becomes unbalancing about it.
Yeah.
And I know all their thought process is, the media is saturated with left, so we're counterbalancing by talking mostly right stuff. Right. But it depends where
true.
It's
just not true. Yeah. It's only true. Here's the funny thing about it. It's only true in internet culture. Because internet culture creates this false sense of security for people on the left where it's a bubble. And like if you go on Twitter, it's predominantly the most popular stuff is dominantly on the left. It just is. Whereas right wing is still more traditional. It's more older people. Yep. So it's more traditional media. People are still watching Fox News on cable television. Whereas it's still a very split. Like when you look at the power dynamics, which I think is what a lot of people fail to do in this setting where people think, the left has Hollywood, the left has the New York Times and journalists, like the left has podcasts. Like there's all these sort of...
The left has archetypes.
Right. It's all these arbitrary, like, just things in the air that people like to say, which there's truth to it. There's truth that I think we can all agree that Hollywood leans left. There's truth that we can say the general media, as if you're looking at it like New York Times, Vox, like a lot of these like newer publications and like grants, like the bigger ones, like whatever. New York Times obviously is like the one they point to, but that's true. But then there's also the right wing. There's Wall Street Journal. There's Fox News. There's Breitbart. These are huge outlets, and they're supporting the people that are in government right now, who also have that the Republicans have the power of Congress and the presidency. So it's this weird, like, what are you pushing back against? Like, you're pushing back against internet culture in a lot of ways.
You're pushing back against a perception, and it's a small perception.
Yeah, it's always the blown up, like the article headlines that we all see that are ridiculous, like these quote-unquote regressive left headlines where, just some absurd claim is being made, and then the right wing gets to make fun of that and say, this is what the left is. Whereas even people on the left make fun of that. Yeah. Like there's just some stuff that gets put out there because it's so extreme that it seems like this is what the whole collective is.
Yeah, and people in the internet are familiar with the term and the concept of clickbait and how everything is skewed to get attention.
Right.
So, I mean, not that doesn't happen in traditional media, because it obviously does. Like that's where it came from, but I don't think it was as much of a term.
It's looked at through a microscope now too.
Yeah.
On the internet. Yeah, it's just more we highlight it more often. So dude, like kind of like backtracking a little bit. I mean, you kind of want to go through how like we started this pivot off by me getting into how Jordan Peterson re-sparked your interest in archetypes and Carl Jung and all that, because that's what a lot of his early focus was on. So you want to kind of
really just that, because at the time I was getting more into writing than I had before, so I was trying to think of like, I don't know, I was reading about writing and writing about writing.
Right.
And just writing things.
Right.
Yep. So wait, what you want?
I was just gonna say,
why I was interested in him when
I
he
was
came
gonna
out.
say,
Or
well,
what?
you can kind of go as long or short as you want, but I was gonna say if you're interested in sharing sort of how. So that was like 2 years ago. So like, if you want to kind of walk through your process of breaking down that sort of framework, where you started off by you literally watched every one of Jordan Peterson's lectures, and you were one of the people.
His college lectures. So when you showed me that Rogan podcast, I had never heard of this guy. I had no idea about the C16 situation.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what caught my interest in that, not that the whole podcast wasn't interesting, and this is his first appearance I'm talking about. It's like November 2016. I think it was November. Most of what interested me in that podcast was in the second half of it, when he was talking about writing and the process of writing, and how the process of getting thoughts out of your head and then like looking at them from the outside kind of crystallizes them in a way.
Yeah.
And like editing, it just improves your thinking. I was like, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then from that, he pivoted to somehow, I don't remember how, but he started talking about like these deep like religious stories and like archetypes, and how these patterns appear in like popular culture. Like he was bringing up stuff in like fairy tales, which is obvious, like those that's the easiest grab. So are Disney movies, because they are fairy tales retold.
Right.
And then like Game of Thrones and Harry Potter and like the Marvel, he's just like
he was going all over the place.
Yeah. And he said something really cool where he's like, yeah, those Marvel movies, that's like the return of polytheism in the culture for a generation of
all
people.
These different gods.
Yeah. Like subconsciously, like obviously nobody's worshiping. Well, some people worship comic book characters, but they kind of serve similar purposes, where they're these vessels to hold these ideals.
And it's so big, like all those movies.
And everybody loves them. Like
yeah.
you feel stuff when you watch them. You're just like, damn, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And like they're inspiring. Like they serve similar roles. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. Like that seems like writing is worthwhile if you can do stuff like this. And he was talking about music and how it fills everyone with a sense of like transcendental awe when you listen to it. Like it doesn't matter what you're listening to, you're going to latch on to something, and you'll feel that even if you believe in nothing.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, and then he was talking about, he's talking about a lot of things that I was already interested in.
Yeah, you were personally latching on to the words he was saying, which sparked interest then in his work.
So then I dove into his work, and he's talking about psychology, neuroscience, evolutionary biology, history, literature, art, and he's going in and out of all these topics like he's talking about one thing.
Right.
And I was like, yes, this is how I think.
Exactly.
This, like, I can follow this track. And the way that he was dishing out this information, it was just really appealing to me, because like he was going through really complicated ideas, obviously simplifying them, because you can talk for 400 years about this stuff and not get to it.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people they mix up with people like him, where he's considered by some a public, quote unquote, public intellectual, and you could, depending on your linguistics, that could be the correct term for him. But he's more of a communicator of these ideas than like someone like a Noam Chomsky, who's like on like actually doing the writing and the research. Like he, not that he doesn't do that, but that's not his primary vessel. Like he's primarily
he did that for a topic for his book, and that was 19 years ago. Yeah, he published that book. So his course was based on that book. That's what he's talking about.
And he is a clinical psychologist, so I think he's had like 1,000 or so his name is in like 1,000 or so published works. So it's not like he doesn't do that.
He's a personality researcher, so he's actually like well published in that realm.
But when it comes to actually like it's a conglomerate of ideas that you're talking about, it's not like he's an expert in any one of these things. He's just interested in all of them.
He's
and
using
communicating
that
them.
to illustrate the ideas of stuff like archetypes, because
Right.
the course and the book was called Maps of Meaning, which is he was applying stuff like archetypes and religious stories to, like I said, like neuroscience and just pointing out where he saw overlaps.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that he was doing that, he's like, I'm not saying anything specific about this. It's just like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I get really juiced up about this.
Here's what I see.
What do you guys think about this?
Right.
And you can tell in his demeanor when he teaches his class, he's like the dad, and he's like, gather around, kids. It's story time.
Right.
For 40 hours,
Right.
we're going through this story, and like I'm real excited about it, and you can just like see it, and I'm just like, well, this is really fun to listen to, because like I do visual work, so I can listen to this while I work. I'm just like, I don't know, I got some fulfillment out of that. It was a lot of fun. But once he started getting more popular after that Rogan bump, like I would say, if you're interested in this kind of stuff and you want to check out his lecture series, do it from the year 2016. He puts them up every year. I would do 2016 because 2017, there's a noticeable difference.
He started getting more produced and
more produced, but also his demeanor was much more serious and reserved and certain, which wasn't the draw for that. Like what I liked about him was he was asking questions and pointing stuff out. He's like, oh, isn't this interesting over here? Whereas in 2017, it seemed like people are really latching on to what I'm saying. It must mean that what I'm saying is fact.
Is correct.
Yeah.
Right. He latched onto a tribe.
Yeah.
Because they latched onto him.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of the beginning of missteps.
Right.
And like my opinion of him now is way different than my opinion of him 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that followed in lockstep with him getting more popular and opening himself up to saying a lot more problematic things and aligning himself with more problematic people, and it sort of do you want to kind of get into like was it sort of like a slow death for you? You know what I mean? Death metaphorically.
No, I would still say it was a slow death.
Yeah.
Because that through maybe the first half of 2017 into the second half, he started appearing more places, pretty much only right-wing places.
Centered to the right.
Yeah, and he started saying more and more things, and at first I knew like what he was getting at, because I had all that context of what he was thinking about when he said things that could be taken.
You could literally be that internet troll who's like, you have to watch all his lectures to understand. Like that could have been. It was never you.
Yeah.
But it could have been you, because you were like, I get what he's like. I've followed him for so long. Like a lot of those kids, they on the internet, they're lying. They've probably watched 2 lectures, whereas you literally watched all of them.
Yeah, so they have some kind of like some shadow work going on. Like, oh, I'm going to say that he's actually saying this, but it's because I actually like what he just said.
Right. It's more that.
I want you to accept it because this is what I want to happen.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that was... But I just noticed that he was starting to make leaps and oversimplifications and just like incorrect stuff that I couldn't trace back. So then I was like, oh, what?
Where did this come from?
Like, I mean, I never wanted to... I told people about him because, like, I got stuff out of him. Yeah. So I was like, well, I don't want to hoard this for myself. I want to show some other people, see if they're interested. And if they're not, cool. I might bring it up every once in a while more than they want to, because I think about this stuff
you're interested
all the time. But I was never, like, a fanboy.
Right.
And if he does something wrong, like, dude,
He's up for criticism.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing, I think, for a lot of people, if anyone's listening to this and into Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris or Joe Rogan or any of these sort of cultish figures, where if you can be into them in a healthy way, whereas you extract information that you think is interesting. Like if I'm big into mixed martial arts, so I've always been into Joe Rogan because of that. There was a direct correlation there. Like my dad was an amateur fighter. He got me into fighting and practicing jiu-jitsu at a younger age. So I grew up with that sort of part of my mind that was attached to there. And I think similarly for a lot of people with Sam Harris, where they went through an atheist deconstructing phase in like the mid 2000s when the four horsemen of the new atheists.
That was a fun time.
Right. Like, that's a
good times, man.
Weird time for YouTube, all those YouTube debates. But it's like, so there's a lot of people then who latched onto his ideology at that point, and because they related to him in that way. So there's these and then now you have Jordan Peterson, who's like the newest person where he comes around and people latch on to these early moments of whatever you want to call it, virability, and then it becomes part of their story. So it can easily become, you can easily take listening to Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris or Joe Rogan, these are just three examples off the top of my head because I know they're really, really popular figures, and become a cult member. And everything, like, because like a guy like Sam Harris has had people.
Well, I mean, everybody wants certainty, so there's a natural drive for that.
And a lot of unfortunately, for people who try to think critically about this stuff, the left, quote unquote, like people on the left. Again, I didn't literally. I was trying to be funny, but it didn't come off funny at all. People on the left have misstepped a lot in this field, where there's guys like Glenn Greenwald or Reza Aslan, who Sam Harris has spoken about countless times, to the point now where he sounds like a crybaby in a lot of situations, but they have mischaracterized him over the years. So then what that does is create this weird pattern where now anytime somebody criticizes Sam Harris, it's you're taking him out of context, whereas like there's a lot of valid criticisms of the guy, and there's a lot of valid criticisms of his foreign policy views. There's a lot of people who think, oh, well, he's progressive in A, B, and C ways, whereas they're unable to see how he's conservative in D, E, and F ways. Like, he's a neocon in a lot of ways, so in foreign policy specifically. So it's really dicey where if you get into that group think of, oh, I love Sam Harris because I'm an atheist and I needed him to get through that, and then everything he says is infallible at that point.
And everybody's always against him, and I know what he...
Right, yeah.
What is good, it's so I need to defend him.
Which is like the Christian, like the Western evangelical Christian thing, where it's like they love to be victims. It's like, because it's the martyrdom feeling. Yeah. It's like, oh, culture is against us, you know? Like secular culture is trying to rid the world of God's love and Christianity, so we are the chosen ones that have to rise above all this hate and everything, which is the same exact thing you get with a lot of these people who they make them into gods, basically.
Archetypes, man.
That's just all archetypes.
Can't escape the pattern.
Anyway, so sorry, man. I keep jumping over these different thoughts. So yeah, you had noticed the shift in Jordan Peterson's content as he got more popular and just kind of falling out.
And at first, like just like what you were saying with Sam Harris, people were already against him because how he became popular, which was fuzzy to begin with and hard to get to the bottom of that. Yeah. So like, it makes sense that people would naturally be like, everything this guy says, you can assume the worst because he's clearly a horrible person. Right. So at first I was like, well, I see what he's saying, and I'm not saying anything specific, and I hope people don't attribute the worst to that. Like, they think that I'm okay with hating trans people or something like that. Yeah, or that I don't think that women can work in the workplace and wear makeup in the workplace.
Because now all these pieces of rhetoric have become attached to that. Yeah. Right.
Like, that was a more recent one, and that one I was like, what?
Yeah, what are you saying, dude? What is this? And then, like, the sort of cultish justifications people come up with, like the enforced monogamy comment he made, where people were trying to, even his statements, where he was basically saying it's unsaid in culture because we all just assume, marital status has been normalized for so many years, centuries. Like, marriage is in the culture, it's embedded. It's like he was trying to basically backpedal in a way that made what he said make sense, which still, in my view, doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And the people that tried to defend him, especially online, that I went through each major moment, whether it was like Twitter comments, Reddit comments, YouTube comments, trying to find a thread of someone making sense of all this, I just couldn't. Yeah. It just seemed like a lot of really cultish defenses that just didn't warrant defending. you know?
So there was that, which that started it, and also the fact that if I listened to new stuff that he came out with, it was either more of the same or it was stuff that aren't what I was into.
You didn't sign up for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, okay, well, this ran its course. I'll still keep the things that I got out of it, like that whole type of thinking and like a certain type of religious thinking, and keeping that, I don't know, just the whole religious archetypal thing.
Yeah, you can.
I'll keep that.
Right.
The political stuff, you can miss me with that.
Yeah, miss me with that political shit.
Yeah.
But it is bizarre how it all became hyper politicized, because we all know that's what makes money. We all know these guys all have Patreons now, and you look at their Patreon. It's funny because his Patreon dollars used to be public, and now they're not public anymore. And it's really interesting to note that, because it's obvious that he saw how many people were publicly talking about it and being like, this is not good. Because the last I checked, he was making $75,000 a month.
Yes.
And now those numbers must be over $100,000
I wouldn't be surprised.
A month, man. And that's like...
I can't imagine that.
Right? And
that income.
Because it's not even just the income, it's the power that comes with the influence. The fact that there's that many people willing to give him that money.
Yep.
And that's like the whole Dave Rubin syndrome.
Yeah,
where,
that dwarfs the income.
Yeah, it's the influence. It's the fact that people are looking to these guys, like this quote-unquote intellectual dark web of people. They go to them and again, I shouldn't say... Every time I do this, I'm trying to backpedal. I'm not trying to generalize everybody. Not everybody falls into this category, but many do. So I hope that's obvious without having to say it, but I guess it's not for some people, because some people look for any way to discount what you're saying. But many people who donate to the Patreons of someone like a Dave Rubin or a Gad Sad or a Jordan Peterson, or even a Sam Harris, like whether or not you like them or dislike them or have mixed thoughts on them, the reason most people, or at least many people, are donating to them is for certainty. They know that on a weekly basis, they're going to listen to these podcasts, watch these YouTube shows, watch these podcast conversations like on each other's platforms, and they're going to get the same exact rhetoric reflected back to them that they wanted to hear. It's all about how
they're paying for a talk show.
Yeah, it's talk radio basically. It's like okay, the left is terrible. Here's why. Let's just generalize everybody into this little bubble. So
we can feel superior.
Yeah, and let's strawman postmodernism. Let's strawman Marxism. Let's strawman Islam. It's all these issues that if you're a critical thinker, specifically on the right or from center to right, you may have valid criticisms of each of these subjects, and that is perfectly fine, and I'm with you. As the person speaking about this right now, I have a lot of the same apprehensions and criticisms of Islam as an ideology, and of postmodernism, and of Marxism, of capitalism. I have criticisms of all these systems.
Every ideology ends in its pitfalls.
Yes, so like as an individual, I empathize with people who want to think more critically about these things, but I can't empathize with people who constantly overgeneralize and strawman this stuff. And they speak
because they're clearly not trying to learn.
No, and that's how it's framed. It's framed, the intellectual dark web. Like can't even say it seriously. It's so hard to even say. It's so dumb.
But it's hilarious, especially when they refer to themselves
in a serious way.
You don't do that.
Please,
it's like giving. Yeah, well, it isn't like giving yourself a nickname. They gave themselves a nickname.
And Eric Weinstein is the one who coined the term, and he said it was all cloak and dagger, like all fun and games. But then a guy like Dave Rubin comes out with a YouTube video. What is the intellectual dark web? And he's dead serious explaining what this is. And the fact is that these guys and it is mostly guys, and there's a few women involved in it. But again, a lot of those women just have the same exact ideological biases as the men. It's not like they talk so much about viewpoint of diversity. And for them, viewpoint of diversity basically ends at baseline social issues of like gay marriage and legalizing marijuana.
Yeah.
That's basically it. It's like, okay, we can all agree these things should be a thing, and now everything else, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just this, it's like, let's just focus on the left now.
Yeah.
We don't need to focus on any other things, so. But it's, sorry.
No.
I saw you, like,
I was just going to say, well.
You were gearing up to.
But tell me about the left. How's it feel?
But
regressive.
Regressive left, the social justice warriors. But, sorry, that's our Dave Rubin impression. But, all this to say, they frame it like they're trying to improve public discourse, and they're trying to improve debate, and they're trying to educate people. And it's like, if you're trying to do that, actually invite people on your shows who are going to challenge your views in a way that's not strawmanning them. And don't invite sensationalist whack jobs on so you can just further prop up your position. Like, I'm not like a diehard Chapo Trap House fan by any means. You know this about me.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in them, and I follow them, and I try to understand a lot because I'm part of a lot of communities that they're involved in. And I think even though they're snarky and their rhetoric is way more, it's more trickster to that archetype.
Yeah.
Like, that's the sort of archetype they play with them because they look at these, like, quote unquote rational people.
ContraPoints, trickster AF.
And she's the same way. She's friends with all these guys. At least I think, at least in the same. They're all in the same ideological vein where they look toward this spectrum that we're talking about of the quote unquote intellectual dark web, and it's all these people idolizing rational, logical thinking, and they think they're so smart.
Yeah, but they're not really participating in the thing that they idolize.
Exactly. So you have these guys, you have even like a show like the Majority Report with Sam Cedar and Michael Brooks is popular on that show. These are two guys who have criticized Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson and all these folks ad nauseum. And they do it in a lot of funny, snarky, trickster ways. And the fans of a Jordan Peterson or a Sam Harris or a Dave Rubin look at guys like that and they say, "Oh, well, he's just ad hominem attacks. Like, he's just unfairly criticized." And it's like, yes, because they're making fun of you because you need to be made fun of.
Yeah.
Because you can't make fun of yourself. I mean, that's what a lot of it comes down to. It's like none of these people, they're so defensive at this point because they feel like the culture is so against them. They've created this isolation bubble where they are now the victims that they rail against. You know what I mean? Like, they're all anti-SJW, social justice, but they are now the ultimate victims of society because no one understands them and all that. So, I don't know.
Yep.
That's my rant on kind of how they've become, because I still do follow a lot of these people for what it's worth. For some of the content, like you said, you kind of take what you can get and leave the rest behind. But it's such a trap for people.
You just really got to watch yourself that you're going at all this stuff with a clear head, or at least trying to. And because how can you know? You'll always fall into a trap. And then you always have to figure out a way out of it. Yeah. And then find the next one.
Right. Yeah, it's just more and more traps.
It's the game.
Because where we're talking from right now, this is just another trap.
Yep.
So it's easy to listen to this and to think, oh, they sound like they haven't figured it all out. No.
Not the case.
We are
even a little bit
fully aware that this is just another part of the cycle because it just keeps going around and around and around until you die, basically. Yeah. But dude, I mean, from your before we get out of here, because I know it's been a while, but before we get out, what, as someone who has had this interesting perspective journey along the way from the past couple years and all this, like, you are someone who pays a lot. You spend way more hours than the average person deep in this stuff, and you're way more naturally inclined to be interested in it. Whereas I know you've said a lot of people aren't dispositioned in that way. So do you have any, I guess, were there any strong points, specific moments you can point to that sort of help you guide this process, or tips that you could give people to help think more critically along the way because we all have these traps, like we're saying. We all fall into them. So, what are some tools that you've developed along the way to help you out?
Well, I would say, I said this a little bit earlier, what I noticed with Jordan Peterson and why I was kind of backing out. If you're, everybody has people they like listening to, and everybody has even a group of people, not even in the same group, that they like listening to. But if I notice somebody is repeating more stuff than they are telling me new stuff, I can probably shelve them because I've already internalized that information. I don't need it to be repeated at me.
You just feed your confirmation bias.
Yeah, because then it's not thinking, it's feeling.
Yeah.
Like I might like hearing that kind of thing, but I don't need to hear it. I can tell that to myself. I already know it, obviously, because I've recognized that it was repeated.
Right.
So that's one thing. And another thing is, well, I guess that's kind of the main thing.
I love
really.
that. I love the way that you put that. That's so important for people to recognize because it really that's what I guess what I was trying to get at with how this sort of circle of people that we have been deeply involved in the past few years, how they do just repeat.
Yeah.
It you like again, love Joe Rogan.
And also this is what else I was going to say. If you find yourself then repeating those repetitions rather than using what you've learned to come up with your own thoughts. And like, I think this is actually something that Peterson said in the beginning that I liked. Like, make sure what you're saying is you saying it, not like going back to Jung.
How poetic is that?
Right? Yeah, dude, this is why I wanted to do this. I was like, man, I'm bummed out.
Yeah.
Because
it's
like
tragic.
there was so much promise and like I don't feel, at least at this point in the game, that it was lived up to the way that I was hoping it would.
Yeah.
Like I'll admit, I for like the first couple of months that I heard of him, I contributed like $5 to his Patreon.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I'm going to use this to record more lectures about like Carl Jung and religion and Taoism.
Right. Early on, before it was like a sensationalized
It was like
thing.
it was more of, he was talking about producing more of the information that I wanted to hear because there aren't, from my knowledge, maybe somebody can help me out, there's not a whole lot of sources for this. Yeah. Especially like the distilled versions that are like
it's not
a little
accessible.
bit quicker than these impenetrable books.
Yeah, these huge, thick German translated
and
books.
if something can be like produced at a high level, like that'd be cool to see. Yeah. And cool to share with people. And I didn't get that. So I was like, I'm out.
Right.
Like my dollars can go somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I love that, man. Sorry, I was just gonna jump in before and just say that I felt that way as someone who still listens once in a while to Joe Rogan's podcast and love him to death again because I relate so many. There's a weird part of me deep down somewhere that is a meathead. I love fighting. I love
everybody's got that to a degree.
Yeah,
if they're honest with themselves, it might be a microscopic degree. Yeah, but it's there.
Yeah, there's people on the left.
We're animals.
Yeah, there's people on the left that are super anti-violence and they're anti-war and all that, but they'll protest and they'll get violent. Like it's in us to some degree. To some people it's stronger, and other people it's not. But I was gonna say for him it's really. I love him. There's certain podcasts that I'll definitely listen to, most that I tune out at this point. But the way I can tell is exactly to your point, what you were saying about how like repeating old information, like it's endearing almost because like he has so many what I call, or what is generally called Roganisms. Yeah. Or just so many points of interest and topics where he has a great retainer memory of just because he does so many podcasts, I think, that helps where he just memorizes information at such a great rate.
Dude, he's got the dad facts.
Yep, it's just like Fritz Haber and like the Boston Comedy Club and like Coyotes, and there's all this
some crazy Joey Diaz story.
Yep, there's always just random pieces that float around there, and some are funny, some are super informative, some are dumb, some aren't helpful at all. But it's all over the place. But anyway, it's just being able to recognize that is so helpful. And there are some people, again, if anyone's still listening to this, there are some people out there that you can find as resources that try their damnedest to counteract this. I know one who I've been into recently a little bit more is Robert Wright, who his idea, he's definitely not a cult-like personality. Like, he's never going to be as famous as someone like a Jordan Peterson. He just doesn't have that drive in his personality, I don't think. It's like for better or worse. But he's an interesting communicator. He's a funny guy, and he's someone who, with his show on Blogging Heads, if you look at the list just from the past year, the list of people he's had on, it's all over the political spectrum, from far left to far right, and he challenges each one of them. Like, he's sort of a contrarian. Like whoever he talks to, he's very critical of, and that's helpful to me. Like, for where I'm at right now, like, I like that kind of information. Like, I don't think like I said, he's not like a cultish figure. Like, he's not going to be as hyperbolic or entertaining as someone like a Peterson or a Joe Rogan at times, but there's definitely resources like him out there of people that are trying to sort of create this, deconstructionist. And then there's Ina, who does Polite Conversations, who I really enjoy. Like, her podcast is phenomenal. It's way more, it's less focused on, I guess, all around third wave thinking. It's more focused on deconstructing a lot of what we've been talking about. Because she's a Pakistani immigrant who's ex-Muslim and all that, and her background, like, she latched on early on to, like, the Sam Harrises of the world. So a lot of her ideology at this point is deconstructing that, which I think is basically what we've been talking about. It's like super helpful if that's the phase, I guess, you're at. Super that's not sweet. Helpful if you're super into them and you don't want to deconstruct it.
If you want certainty, super not helpful. But
if you're interested in criticizing the people you love. Like,
if you're interested in potentially not being certain about things that might not be what you want to be certain about.
Right, that's a great way of putting it.
So going back to, like, things to do, like I said, notice the repetitions and when you're just feeding your emotions rather than your intellect, and also watching if what you're saying is your thought or somebody else's thought.
Love the both.
I would say also, if you do find somebody you're interested in, become at least somewhat knowledgeable about their influences. And
so important.
Yeah, and read or listen or watch whatever of that you can get your hands on, so you can get the right, or just get a context that you can either take or leave.
Yeah.
But just don't take it at face value.
Yeah, that's always an interesting context, especially in online communities now, YouTube, Twitter. You can see who's done interviews with who, like who they're influenced by. There's like these kind of first, second degrees of separation between some people, where a lot of these people we've been talking about, they're only a couple degrees separated from, like, literal white supremacists.
Yeah.
So it becomes this really strange.
Yeah, so look out for that stuff.
Yeah, you have to know, like, how much. Yeah. And sometimes it's a misstep. Like, sometimes I think there are genuine times where people go on shows and they're unaware of certain affiliations, because who has time to look up everything? But then there are other times where it's a clear intentional ignorance because of a platform. Like a guy like Stefan Molyneux, who has a huge YouTube presence and has said a lot of questionable at best, fascist at worst things, and has terrible. He's had just flat out cordial conversations with white supremacists, and it's like a guy like that who has a huge platform. It's really easy, I think, if you're someone in this sort of vein of thinking, to ignore all the unpleasant trees and just to go on because of how big his platform is. Like, there's a lot of that happening, which is...
Yeah, so maybe we should specify, look for negative and positive influences. Because, like, take Jordan Peterson, for example. I get a lot more out of reading Carl Jung than I do now listening to Jordan Peterson. So
and who was his biggest influence? Yeah.
Like, you get old philosophers, you get, even in the political sphere, people like Jonathan Haidt, Steven Pinker, or, like, I'm just saying, like, who he gets his, like, political facts from, how it seems.
Yeah.
Like, know those guys, too. Like, maybe one of those guys will paint a more holistic picture because of their specialties. Like, especially if you listen to someone like a Rogan or a Peterson who is like this distillation of all these separate things.
Yeah.
You'll maybe kind of not repeat so much simple statements. If you research more of this background stuff, where it's coming from, you can come up with your own stuff that you repeat in your head.
Yeah.
And tell people. Then it's
your
like
thoughts.
Yeah, and then it's coming with a good intention. If your intentions are good, you got to be real with yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those are the only things.
I love that. I would even just add, we're trailing out here at this point, but I would add to the end of that sometimes if something hurts to hear about somebody that you love, sometimes you need to hear it.
Yep.
I think it's hard for a lot of people to hear criticisms of their heroes and the people that they look up to, and it becomes like, oh, it's all, like we said before, mischaracterizing and just, slandering and ad hominem, and there's always like excuses you can make because sometimes those things, there's truth in that a lot of times, I should say.
And if you can accept that, you're probably not idolizing this person
to
a level that isn't exactly healthy.
Yeah.
Because they are just people. If you met them, you could talk to them and you could find out that, I don't know, they're not the gods that you think they were.
No one is a god.
Yeah. Literally no one.
Maybe we all are.
We don't. That's what it is. That's what it is. We all are.
We are all gods. We're
God
living
is
in
in
Westworld. Cool, dude. This was a fun time, as always, talking about this stuff with you.
That was one heckin' rabbit hole.
Sounds like a
fun.
meme. Yeah, man. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing a bit about your story. I think a lot of, like, the way you worked through a lot of that it's super helpful for a lot of people to hear, and including myself, because we relate heavily in this stuff. It's easy to bounce through these ideas because we're very similar in this way, which we have to watch out for.
Yeah, we do.
We could just easily feed into each other's biases. But it's always fun, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing the good word.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's a party. It was a long way to get here, right into the basement of our office.
Yeah.
We walked a total of like 30 feet to get
I'd like to do this again sometime. I don't know what we'll talk about next time.
Oh, we can talk about anything. We set this third mic up. We can get someone else down here too. Make it a party.
Yeah, it'd be sick.
Cool.
I'm down.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Later.